Welcome to the Senate District 46 Legislative Town Hall. I'm State Senator Ron Latz. I'm flanked by Representative Cheryl Joachim and Representative Larry Kraft. We are your legislative delegation in St. Paul, and we welcome the opportunity to hear what you have to say, to listen to your thoughts, your questions. We'll respond, and to give you some thoughts of our own on what we're looking at this legislative session. We are going to end at 7:15 out of respect for Ramadan. So we will go from now until 7:15. It's kind of a hard stop. So we'll just time it as best we can at that point. I guess maybe I'll just start. If I could you want to say something first? Go ahead.
Just one quick thing for folks that are watching on TV. If you happen to have a question, you can send it to my email, and my trusty legislative assistant there is monitoring that. You can get questions from remote. My email is rep.larry.craft@house.mn.gov.
Okay. Did you want to describe the format for Q&A also? Is Caleb going to be involved in that?
Yeah, so for folks in the room, for Q&A, if you have a question, raise your hand. You can obviously come up to the dais here if you want, but we also have a wireless mic that Caleb will bring around so you can ask questions that way.
All right, so a quick introduction. I'm Ron Latz. I'm your state senator. I chair the Senate Judiciary and Public Safety Committee. I'm also on the Senate Commerce Committee. I've served 20 years now in the legislature, between 4 years in the House and the balance in the Senate. Served on the city council here for 9 years before that. I live in St. Louis Park. I've got 2 kids that have flown the coop to New York. I got one 10th grader left in town. And I'm very pleased to be able to continue to represent this district, St. Louis Park, all of St. Louis Park, all of Hopkins, and about a quarter of Edina. This legislative session is focused primarily on policy and capital investments or bonding. We have set a 2-year biennium budget last spring. So we'll do a little bit of cleanup this year. There may be some one-time and ongoing money to spend, but not a lot. And my own view is we ought to be pretty conservative about that because we put a lot of spending into place last year to meet a lot of needs that have been unmet for a long, long time. We don't know what the future holds in terms of the economy and revenues for the state. We have a robust reserve, but we have a big state budget, and if the economy takes a dip, we don't want to have to dramatically slash the programs that we have funded. So we want to, in my view, keep as much as we can in reserves and be very cautious about what we spend this spring. The bonding bill is the capital investment bill. It's an opportunity for us to make infrastructure investments in our community, such as roads, bridges. We got an intersection in Edina that's an important priority there. We've got 2 projects in St. Louis Park, including one at Oxford in Louisiana, reconstruction. There's a Hopkins resiliency building as well, and another Hopkins project as well. So a lot of interest in our communities. We are coordinating among the 3 of us to try to prioritize our efforts to get as much as we can into the bonding bill. Again, that's going to be limited by the amount of funding that's available this year to service the debt that we would put into place. In terms of policy, there's still a lot of policy proposals out there. Some of the things we were not able to get to last year, some of the things that weren't ready last year that have been tweaked or changed since then, and its advocates are taking another run at getting them passed this year. So those policy things go. From my standpoint, I've got a collateral consequences bill that would not only do a better job of disclosing to people involved in the justice system what the collateral consequences might be of how they resolve their cases, but also create a process for a certificate of rehabilitation if they take proper steps, so they will have an easier path back into the community so they don't get involved further in the criminal justice system. I've got a bill that would cap restaurant gratuities at 5%, not gratuities, surcharges, non-gratuity surcharges at 5%. So still leave some room for the restaurants to recoup some of the costs that they are utilizing for their operating expenses, and usually that's going toward benefits for the employees, but also not end up with the 18% surprises at the end of the restaurant stay that seems to happen to a lot of people, even though it's usually disclosed in some notice somewhere along the way. So those are just a couple of the pieces that I'm working on. Most of my time is right now being taken up managing the workload of the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee, which is a committee of original jurisdiction for a lot of proposals, but we also, such as data practices proposals that come through, civil liability issues. But because so many other bills in the legislature also have a component that involves a government data issue or an enforcement provision, anything that creates a crime, they all come through the judiciary on secondary jurisdiction. So our committee is pretty busy, and it's a great thing. I love doing it, and I look forward to hearing what you think we ought to be doing this legislative session as well. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to our next senior legislator, Cheryl Joachim.
Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm Representative Cheryl Joachim, and I know we're also battling absolutely gorgeous weather, which I'm sure a lot of you would rather be on a patio right now. So thank you for being here tonight. I live in Hopkins. I have for, 27 years. My husband and I have 3 grown adult children, and I have been in the House this is my 10th year. I chair Education Finance. I'm on Education Policy. I'm on the Tax Committee and on Ways and Means. And we have a lot of work we're doing. As Senator Latz said, we are really focused on bonding and policy this year. Last year, we set a large state budget. And as the Education Finance Chair, I got to have $2.2 billion above base to spend. The education budget's about 38% of the state budget. And we did a lot of great things with it. We fed kids. We did universal meals for breakfast and lunch. We indexed the formula to inflation. We tackled the ELL. We increased ELL funding for our language learners by 3 times. We tackled the SPED cross subsidy, which is way too complicated to talk to you about tonight. We have CTE investments to make sure our kids have a pathway to a career either if they want right away when they leave high school or into their higher ed degrees. So we increased support for support personnel in our schools, school nurses, school counselors, school teachers, school social workers, and our school psychologists. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so my brain sometimes doesn't catch up. We increased pathways for our teachers of color, and we did a lot more than that. But the education bill was wonderful, but we still have more work to do. There was about 20 years of underfunding in public education, and we can't turn that around overnight. So we still need to lay out that need this year, even though we won't get a lot of money. We had the forecast come out in February. It's a decent number, but it's all mostly one-time money. And almost everything you do in education has to be ongoing. For example, we set that 2-year budget for $2.2 million, and when we do our budgets, we also look 2 more years out, and we call that the tails. In education, our tails target was $3.2 million because so much of that goes right into the base. And I'm also carrying some bonding bills for our communities in Hopkins and St. Louis Park, and now have portions of Edina. I only have 2 precincts left in St. Louis Park because Representative Kraft took the rest of it. And I represent all of Hopkins and then the parts of Edina that are west of 100 and north of 62. And we have deadlines. We have policy deadlines next Friday. So by March 21st, all the policy bills have to be out of the House and Senate and into either a finance bill or to the floor. And then on April 14th, we have our budget deadlines where all of our budgets have to be through to the Ways and Means Committee in the House or the Finance Committee in the Senate. And in between that, we have breaks for Easter, Passover, and the end of Ramadan. So a lot of work to do in the next few weeks. And all of us carry such a variety of bills. If we could, you'd be amazed. This week alone, I have 4 bills that were up. We had to readjust the forecast model in the education bill. It's up in Ways and Means on Monday. I'll be up on the floor on Thursday for that. I carried a bill this morning in education finance that looked at the intermediate and cooperative school districts bill back to the homeschools around special education and doing some adjustments. Expanding Vale Place, our community clubhouse model, to other communities, and then also I have a student press freedom bill up tomorrow night. So we all carry a variety of bills, which makes our jobs very exciting. But what's the most exciting is to have you here to talk to us and to have you communicate with us. For those of you out in the audience or on TV, you can always get a hold of all of us via our house or Senate email. You can just go to house.mn or senate.mn, and it has a member link. There you can also sign up for our weekly updates. I do one every week during session and about once a month during the summer. I just wrapped up my community conversations that are every 2 weeks at the local libraries. But the point is we're accessible because we want to hear from you. And I'm excited to hear the questions you have tonight. And I will kick it over to Representative Kraft.
Thank you. I love that I'm the young rookie. So I'm Larry Kraft. I have the honor of representing a big chunk of St. Louis Park. Before that, I was on City Council. I serve on 4 committees. I'm the Vice Chair of Climate and Energy. I'm also on Commerce, Transportation, and Sustainable Infrastructure. I think I'm going to, we did some great stuff last year. I'm not going to spend that much time on that. I do want to talk about the budget, because sometimes you may have heard things like, oh, there might be a structural deficit or this or that. If you look at our budget for this section and the next one, we're in good shape. We have to be careful. We can't be, I totally agree with Senator Latz that we have to be careful with how we spend money. But the state is in good financial health. In terms of things that I'm working on for this session, I would say there's 4 or 5 main areas. So as many of you may know, I got involved with politics to do something about climate change. So I bring a climate lens to a lot of the work that I do. I wound up getting involved in other things. Senator Latz and I are working on a net neutrality bill. I'm involved in a mental health bill as well. But the majority of stuff has some connection to climate. The nice thing is that climate policy, I think, is all policy. And in fact, I believe that climate change provides a roadmap to us to just better living. So a few areas I'm working on, grid-related stuff. I've got 3 bills that help the grid, because we have to have a 2 or 3x size grid over the next 10 to 20 years to handle the renewable energy and the electrification that's happening. So I've got a few things that are helping the grid be more efficient, or help build it faster, or leverage the existing lines better. Buildings is a key focus of mine. Buildings are 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions in Minnesota. So last session, I did some stuff on commercial building codes. This session, I'm trying to do residential energy codes. And codes are, I know it doesn't sound exciting, but they're super cool. But it's, and if you believe that, no, but what it is this is how new homes are built. And what I want to do is be able to have it so that over the next really 12 to 15 years, the codes get increasingly better, so that by mid-late 2030s, all homes being built are super energy efficient, basically energy efficient enough that they can be net zero if you can put renewables on them. So that's one thing. Another, I'm hoping to do things around building performance standards that's more at commercial buildings and help them to get to lower and lower emissions over time. One of the biggest bills I'm working right now is on housing, something called a missing middle. There's been some stuff in the papers about it. This I came to several months ago with the realization that we have a really serious housing shortage in Minnesota. And it drives up prices, and it also makes it drives up homelessness. It also makes affordable housing a lot tougher. So if we don't, but the key insight is, if we don't build that housing in the right places, and if we don't build it in the right way, it will make our climate emissions problem, especially on transportation, a lot worse, right? So because land use drives so much about emissions. If we build these new houses sprawling further and further out away, what's going to happen is transportation emissions go up, and that's our #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions. Plus, right, the other thing is, if you build them in a more intelligent way, from a density perspective, you actually can help build community. because people have to spend less time in their cars and can be more out in their community. So that's a bill I'm working that would look at how do we, St. Louis Park is doing some great stuff in this area, but not all cities are. It's trying to, how do we raise the level so that people can build and get houses that they want? Maybe it's a duplex, maybe it's a townhome, so that people can live in where they want to work or where they want to live in community, can own a home, and also so they can build wealth. So that's a key bill I'm working on. Another one, which is one of my favorites, is boat shrink wrap plastic, which this was brought to me by a constituent. So you all, when you have ideas, definitely bring them to us. But this was, boats get many boats get shrink wrapped in the winter. And this constituent said, hey, I used to be able to recycle this, and it's gone. I can't recycle it anymore. So I started digging into it, and what I've realized is that in Minnesota, by the way, we are the #1 boats per capita state in the country, and we have the #2 amount of boats of any state. The only state that has more is Florida. And if you look at the likely number of boats that get shrink wrapped in the winter, we probably generate over 6 million pounds of plastic a year that's wrapping boats and then getting thrown out or getting incinerated. So what this would do is it's an extended producer responsibility bill that would require those that make this stuff to actually have to fund the collection of it and recycling of it. And we know it's possible because in Michigan, there's a company that does it for $9 a boat. So those are some things. I'm also hoping to do some stuff from regenerative agriculture as well. But one of the things I'm learning in this session is deadline comes up fast. And in many bills that you really like, you have to say, okay, that one's not going to go this session. So with that, I think we might want to open it up to questions.
Let's do that.
And I would just add too, if you feel comfortable saying your name, but it would be helpful for us to know what your city you're from too. So you don't have to give your address or anything, just your city is fine.
I go up there just because I have this piece of paper. Thank you. Good evening, Representatives Joachim Kraft and Senator Latz. My name is Francoise Willem Shirley, and I have lived in Hopkins for 29 years. I would like to ask about medical aid in dying and the Minnesota End-of-Life Options Act legislation. This bill is designed to help support terminally ill patients and their families at the end-of-life stage. It couldn't mean more to me because of my family's own very painful and traumatic journey. My mom passed away from cancer 2 years ago, and like so many others, suffered greatly for an extended period of time. She had advocated for this to become legal long before she even became ill. 74 million terminally ill patients have access to medical aid in dying in the U.S., but Minnesotans do not. I am here because my mother can't be, and I am also speaking on behalf of many terminally ill Minnesotans who need and want this to pass, who want a voice and a choice, who want bodily autonomy, who need peace of mind, who want to die on their own terms, who deserve dignity. I know this issue is important to you. Can you tell me what the chances of this bill getting to the floor are in this session, and how can we help ensure that it does?
I'll start out first. I just want to thank you because you've been a tireless advocate telling your story and your parent and your family's story, both at the Capitol and in other places. So it had a second hearing today in Judiciary. I caught the tail end of it, and it's going to Commerce. So in the House, it's been through 3 committees already. And I think the next stop after Commerce might be the floor, but I have to double check. I am not sure where it's at in the Senate, but I know there really is a big push behind it. And so for people to know, sometimes we've also called it the Compassionate Care Act, and it's really crafted very tight. You have to have on terminal illness where you will pass within a year. It has to have 2 doctors sign off on it. And it really does give that peace of mind, like you're saying. And it has to be self-administered. So this isn't a doctor doing it, it's yourself doing it. And I know there's people that want it to go farther, and there's people that don't want it at all. I think Representative Freiberg's crafted a really well-rounded and tight bill, and really hoping it finally gets across the finish line. I'm so excited there's more people signed on, because for quite a while it was usually just Representative Freiberg and myself. So thank you.
I don't know what the status of the bill is in the Senate. I do support it. And it seems to me it has a lot more legs this year than it's ever had in the past. It was more of a isolated idea floating out there with a lot of opposition in the past. And I think we may be past that point. It'll have its opposition. There are those who, for religious or moral reasons, object to it. For me, it's really a matter of personal autonomy. And as you have said so eloquently, people deserve the right to decide how they will die if they have the opportunity to make that decision. And I would support that.
It's funny you ask. I got a text at 4:53 p.m. from the author of the bill, Representative Freiberg, because I am on the Commerce Committee, just saying, am I comfortable voting for it? And my response was, hell yes. So I for all the reasons that my colleagues have said, and I appreciate your advocacy for it. But yeah, so I look forward to it.
Don't be shy.
Thank you. My name is Bruce Browning. I'm a citizen here in St. Louis Park and have been since 1979, back in the days of lots of delicatessens and things like that. There are a couple things coming to mind. I was curious about where we are with the Southwest Light Rail, how that is impacting our area at this point. I know there's been a lot of construction work going on. Is that still on track, no pun intended, to start up sometime, is it next year?
27.
27?
2027.
Okay. How has that impacted the city at this point? Are we going to be able, are we going to have to pay more in taxes to support that, or are we going to stay pretty much the same at this point?
I don't believe there's been any, with the delays that have happened, that any additional amount has come to St. Louis Park. I don't believe any more has. Hennepin County has chipped in some more. So you could say, there's a Hennepin County tax that we all pay. So I can't guarantee you that something doesn't come back in some way. But from what my understanding is, no more has come back to the city of St. Louis Park.
Okay. Another question, and it comes to
I'll
mind.
just add real quick,
sorry.
just so you know, I'm so sorry. I wanted to add this too. It is on track. It's been a long time coming. What it's done to affect, I know for Hopkins, is it's really grown our base of taxes by a lot more density and a lot more businesses coming in, so that's a positive. And at the tail end of this, originally, quite a few years ago, there was something that changed at the legislature in a statute that was done because of a compromise, where Hennepin County would have had to pick up all of the operating costs, where every other line and every other Metro Transit is picked up by the county and by the state with a shared responsibility, but they put it all on the county. So that would have cost us a lot more in dollars. And I had had a bill to add back in that state share, but Representative Chair Hornstein went a little further, and the state is now picking up the share for the operating cost totally. So that should help when it comes to that part of it when it gets into operation, which let's hope it's the spring of 27.
Well, hopefully it will go well. I think it's a good idea, and hopefully it will go relatively smoothly. The other thing that came to mind, I have a mother-in-law that is 88 years old. She's living in an assisted living facility in Ridgefield right now. But the thing that has been complicating the issue is finding out what's the difference between independent living, senior living, assisted living, nursing home, and she has something referred to as an elderly waiver. And we did talk to a place in Hopkins called Chapel View a while back, but it's very hard to negotiate what it is that she should be in and what she qualifies for, because so many nursing homes or assisted living facilities, they don't all take elderly waiver, and I'm sometimes not even sure what elderly waiver actually is. Some places will go, well, you have to live here for 3 years before you're eligible for elderly waiver. that seems to be a complicated thing, and I don't know if it is for other people that are dealing with parents that are showing signs of dementia and things like that. But is there a way that could be clarified, do you think, that would be helpful to those of us that are trying to figure that out and are having a heck of a time trying to do it?
This is a pretty complicated area. As you know, you almost need a specialist to try to answer your questions, and I'm not one in that space, so.
We do have a senior ombudsman office, an elderly ombudsman office that you can call up the State Department to maybe help through. A lot of the times, though, your county officials will be the best place to look at helping with the waiver, because we kind of give over a lot of that stuff to the county. We're like a pass-through from the federal government for the county to administer some of those funds. But if you reach out to your county commissioner, you can also copy us or whoever's your legislator on the emails too, so we can help out if we can with questions.
Sir, you were about to stand up if you wanted to.
Careful what you wish for.
Let me guess, is it about pensions?
My name is Timothy Moynihan. I'm Vice President of Retired Educators Association, Minnesota, and I'm an Ed Minnesota retired member. I was a 35-year teacher in Orono, retired. I've spent the whole of my latter 30 last years advocating for schools and for those who conduct the schools and the teachers who do the work. I'm going to sound like I'm scolding you, so I'm going to take my hat off first and say, I so appreciate that you're stepping up to do what you do, because it's hard. It's very hard work. And we know, as educators who are retired, in our state, unlike other states, everything that happens in retirement happens because the legislature made it so. This is not true everywhere, but it's true here. And I'm not complaining about that, except that, put my hat back on now because my head would get cold, that it's important that all the people here present and that our people of our state understand that I'm hearing some very troubling things that I don't see our legislators really dealing with directly. Indirectly, I've spoken with Cheryl, and she's my representative, and others in the legislature. We went to absolutely every office. You received information that looks like this from us in your box. If you'd have been there, we'd have talked to you too. That was the very first day of the legislative session. What we want you to know is we are in a historic place as far as education is concerned. On the 29th of February, there was a rally at the pension. There was a pension rally at the Capitol Rotunda. It was sponsored by Ed Minnesota and was attended by people from all over. For the first time since I've been around, active teachers are advocating for better pensions and benefits and pay in ways like they have never before. We heard President Biden speak about it in the State of the Union address. I think it is important that we address this issue now. I know this is not a funding year, and usually pensions have to do with money. The last legislative session that was a revenue session was a paltry amount of money given to that effort. And people are pushing back. Active teachers, more than 20,000 of them, petitioned you to do something about it. And nothing was done, in their view. I'm not speaking for them, but I can see by their actions, which I will tell you about, that they're very, very, very angry and frustrated about it. I put into that the context of what I heard at the LCPR meeting that I went to on Monday morning, 8:30. Chairman Herr holds her meetings early. And she said, or heard said, by a very impassioned Anoka Hennepin teacher about how it is that what she is paid and the student loans that she has means that she cannot be a teacher much longer. We're experiencing this around the state. Her voice is not alone, but she was very eloquent in saying, look at what the federal government did. They passed something called Secure Act 2.0, where they're allowing for employers of teachers to say, we're going to allow what you pay out every month for your loan to be credited towards the match of putting money into your retirement fund. That's a huge thing because they don't have money to do that. In most school districts, the one where I worked, you didn't get the retirement fund in addition to the pension unless you matched it. They just don't have that money. So there is a bill, and it is held in House File 4656, which went through the Legislative Commission on Pensions and Retirement on Monday to be included in the omnibus pension bill. I urge its support because this will help teachers to stay there. I have acquaintances who are professors who are in our organization who report to me that their job is to oversee student teachers teaching in schools that are still collegiate undergrads and grads. How many did they have sign up this semester to do that? Not one. 3 different universities, not one, is even interested in that regard. This is a crisis, and if it doesn't get dealt with by even proposed legislation that would have to be worked and be put forth, then I'm afraid to say you're going to see this crisis worsen. A year before last, I reported to Cheryl, 9,000 teaching positions in Minnesota went unfilled. It couldn't be more a community in interest, Representative Kraft, than that. Because our schools define us as communities, and I've long believed that. And we enjoy wonderful schools here. My kids went to Hopkins. I think the St. Louis Park schools are wonderful too. And the many things that are happening in schools are good. But how can they continue to do more with less? We rank 46th in the United States as to what we put towards pension funding in our state out of 50. We do pensions on the cheap. And like Cheryl said earlier, there are literally hundreds of thousands of teachers that are saying, I have no interest in staying here a long time because I can't afford it. I love my job, but I can't afford it. This must change. There are also 2 other bills I can't name the numbers of. One is by Representative Walgamot, you might know. He is on the LCPR. He is bringing one to help adjust what are some penalties for people who would want to retire early. I don't know the status of that bill, but I think it just went on its way. There's also another bill by Senator Gustafson that does similar things. These things I know cost money, but our state has underfunded pensions for more than 20-some years. And the money that it put forth last year as one-time money, like we heard that's what surplus money is, was a drop in the bucket. It was a help, thank you, but a small one. So those are the 2 things that I have to tell you, and I have some other information. And that is the Tier 2 people are currently so unhappy that they have decided that they want to hire a forensic auditor and his company to come to Minnesota and look for what they can find in how we do business in our state.
I don't want to interrupt you, and what you're saying is valuable and important. I just want to make sure we have time for others also who wish to communicate with us. So
Absolutely.
If you have some information that in writing that you could share with us
Right
on your
here.
other topics or on the one you started out with, I would welcome it and appreciate your sharing it with us.
Well, I thank you for doing that because I can always talk. So Thank you for listening very much, and thank you for your service. I have some information from the National Council on Teachers' Retirement that is a research paper about this person that they want to hire and bring here.
Maybe if you could share that information with Caleb, and he'll make sure that we all get copies of it. Thank you
I
very much.
absolutely will. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
And I just want to say thank you too. And I've become more versed because of you on pensions and my tier 2 teacher living in our household that I have to stop 10 minutes every night after 10 minutes who's telling me all about it too. And it is a real fairness issue right now, and the penalties bill I'll look into. We last year, so Chair Her has the chair of the pension committee, and she only took that gavel with a guarantee from our speaker that she'd get a target, which most pension chairs don't get, and that she'd be able to hold meetings every week and have a staff to help her do it. And so that is in itself was a big step forward. She did not get the target that she asked for or wanted to do more than what we did, because it's not just the teachers' pensions, it's all of our pensions that she's in charge of looking at. But what we did last year was just a drop in the bucket. We changed the natural retirement age for teachers from 66 to 65. And if they retire at 65, they get their full pension. Now, mind you, they've paid into that pension themselves. This isn't just money from the state. It's their share too. But they get penalized 1% every year if they retire early. And if they retired at 55, where a lot of people start thinking about retirement, they'd only get about 40% of their pension. So, or 60%. Which one is it? I'm mixing them up in my head. It's a 40% deduction, so they get 60% of their pension. So it is a real issue, and it's a retention issue, because you have 40-year-old teachers right now looking and going, do I really want to be in this career for 25 more years? And I could start a whole nother career that pays more. So it's a big deal.
A super quick follow-up question. I mean, the same issue is for all state workers. Like if we retire a year earlier, it is like humongous cut to our pension benefits. So since you got it for teachers a year earlier, is there any chance that you're going to do something similar for the rest of us in the state workforce?
I think, is your NRA 65 already, though? It is 66, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll talk to the pension chair about that, too.
A quick follow-up on that. About 15 or so years ago, a friend of mine who was a teacher was within 1 year of retiring, and he went to the teachers board and said, okay, I'll work for another year and pay in this much. At the end of this particular school year, I will write you a check for that amount. Can I retire with my full benefits? And they went away and thought about it, and they came back and said, yeah, because you'll have paid in. So he wrote them a lump sum check before the end of that particular school year and was out the door, and he's been happy as all hell ever since.
And he probably also was a tier 1 teacher where there's not penalties before 62, if it was a few years ago. Maybe. Yeah, they don't really do that much anymore, but I wish we had, some people could have that deal.
Actually more beneficial. From day one, that's a lump sum.
Good evening. First of all, I'm one of those corner of the Edina citizens, and I'm also a recently retired public health worker, governmental public health worker, and I first of all want to thank you for the incredible amount of work and the wonderful things you did for us last year, the last session. Followed it closely, and I know how incredibly hard it was, so thank you. I have a question for Senator Latz and maybe all of you. Your Senate File 165, Release of Health Records Limitation in Cases Related to Reproductive Health. I just saw that tonight. I haven't read the bill. Can you just fill us in on the context of that bill?
Senate File 165?
Yeah. A bill for an act relating to health care, limiting release of health records in cases related to reproductive health. and I apologize, I haven't read the bill, so I can't give you any more.
So thanks to my colleague here has his computer. I'm a co-author. This is Senator Morrison is the chief author
Oh,
on the
okay.
bill. It was introduced January 11th, 2023. It was sent to Human Services and then went to Judiciary. And then it was, the House file was substituted for it. So really to track the status of it, we'd have to take a look at that. I don't know off the top of my head
Okay.
where that
Okay.
is, but if you want to give your contact information to Caleb, we can
Right,
find out.
and there
for
is
you.
there is a House file, you said, for 24.
I think I remember this bill. So this is the one I think it did pass.
reading,
This
this
was
passed.
part of the PRO Act, so it doesn't allow states, if somebody comes here to access reproductive rights,
Okay.
it doesn't allow a state to subpoena us for their health
That's,
records.
okay, that's what we thought. And it did pass. It passed last year
it
or
passed
already
last
this
year.
year?
Passed
last year.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, guys. Hi, I'm Tess Makalik. Many of you know me already. I'm here once again on behalf of Jean Massey to ask how the progress of the local options bill in both the House and the Senate. Yes. I don't know off the top of my head. That's not.
I'm not on, my mic's not on. As I've talked about many times, I'm a huge ranked choice voting supporter. I'm having run in a ranked choice vote election here and just really loved it and loved the incentives it created to go talk to everyone, even if folks are not your supporters. So I'm very much in support of cities having the choice, being able to choose to do it or not. So I think the bill makes a lot of sense. And I'll see if I can find the current status of it.
2486.
2486? Well, that's the bill from last session. That might be a new one.
Oh, you're right, sorry.
It is 3276. It's in elections. I don't see that it's been heard yet, but it's got 28 co-authors on it. Yeah.
We could probably get back to you after we
Yep.
talk to the chair of elections.
Yep.
Thank you.
There's a hearing tomorrow morning in the House.
Hearing tomorrow morning?
The Senate, yeah, the Senate. For the House. The Senate had.
Oh,
a
yeah,
meeting,
I see it.
Or the Senate had a hearing, I think. And I don't know how that, I don't. Pass the Senate, or at least.
Is 3868.
Why don't you come on my head and we'll make sure we look at it and.
Good evening. My name is Carly. I live here in St. Louis Park. I'm also a member of Isaiah Group. Perhaps you've maybe heard of them. My question was regarding the Producer Responsibility Act, which Representative Kraft, you had touched on earlier. And I'm sorry, did you say it was something that wouldn't probably be on the docket for this session.
No, so the bill I have is on boat shrink wrap plastic, and it has had one hearing so far already in the Environment Committee, and I expect I will have a Commerce Committee hearing. It's scheduled for tomorrow, but I'm sort of towards the end, so depending on how it goes, it could get bumped to Monday. There are other producer responsibility bills. There's one, a broader one that Representative Jordan has, more on consumer packaging.
I think, yep, that was the one I was
Yep.
going to ask about, Packaging Waste and Cost Reduction Act.
Yep.
And I would just wanted to hear from each of you if you're, in support of that, why or why not. And, if there were revisions to that, that would gain your support. Just get your take and how you feel about it, if that's something that Minnesota would be able to take on in the near future.
I can start if you want. Yeah. So, yes, I'm in support of it. I'm a co-author on the bill, and we had a good hearing on it in Commerce, and I think I don't know where it went after that. In general, with these things, I think the best time to think about packaging is when you're making the thing. And I will say, even though on these producer responsibilities bills, what the manufacturers will say is, well, it's a fee on us, we're going to pass it on to the consumer, which is, they will. They're that's understandable, but they also can think, like, that's the point of time when you can change a design or think about it differently to actually reduce the amount of packaging that's created, versus at the end you can't do anything about it. Right, at the end, you just need to deal with it. So theoretically, I'm very supportive of these kinds of bills. I know that one is a tough one because it has such a far-ranging impact, and so I'm sure there'll be some challenges with it. But it is progressing in the House.
I'm the same way. Sometimes these bills have to start to have the pressure to go, and sometimes they actually end up changing the producers' actions because of it. I know Representative Edelson talks about why the Sprite bottles are white now light instead of green, because that was a pressure on the producer to change that after they saw legislation moving through in other states. So a lot of the times big ideas start and we'll have the hearings and they get refined through the process and then get into a funding year and actually have something happen. Or sometimes I seem to have like a 3-year track record on almost all my bills. It gets me, I have to get, even with the Hometown Heroes bill to fund firefighters who have cancer, it took me 3 years to pass. So it's super important to have those larger discussions, especially during a policy year. I know we're getting a lot of emails about it though, which is good.
Yeah, I'll add that I support the bills as well. I think the best place to put the responsibility for reducing excess packaging is on those who are producing that packaging in the first place. In essence, it's a liability to them then, and they can reduce their outputs, they can reduce their costs, and they can certainly reduce the excess costs that we all bear if they don't create a more efficient packaging which is more easily recyclable. General Mills was just over at the Capitol today and talked to me about this bill, and they indicated that they're about 90% of the way with all of their products right now that are recyclable at their end of life. So the pressure that we bring to bear by introducing these bills, having these conversations, does get the attention. It will be, retail and consumer purchasing is about 2/3 of the economy. When it's consumer, now that includes services, but I don't know what the number is broken down to products, but it'd be a huge shift in the supply chain, the consumer, retail chain, for us to pass something like this, which is why these kind of big lifts tend to take many years to happen. And even when they are ready to be passed, they'll have an implementation date or effective date somewhere down the road, so people have a chance to adjust their manufacturing processes and their supply chains and their designs and everything else. But I'm a supporter of it. I think it's the best way. Otherwise, they pass off all the externalities to the rest of us, and we're left, as Representative Kraft said, trying to figure out at the end of life what to do with the stuff, which is really a bad way to approach it. So I'm with you on it.
Great. Thank you very much.
I can circle back real quick on the ranked choice voting status in the Senate as well. The last hearing was February 26th. In the Elections Committee, it was recommended to pass and re-referred to State and Local Government Committee, which is where it is right now. At least that's the last status we have. I will tell you, there will be a lot of action in both bodies in the next week and a half because deadlines are coming up quickly. So you're going to see a longer meetings and a flurry of bills moving through the process in the next week and a half.
Good evening, Emily Barker. Nice to see you all. Resident here in St. Louis Park and Cobblecrest. And I actually, on the EPR bill, my understanding is a lot of the pushback is coming from the paper industry, which obviously has a very large impact here in Minnesota. One thing I would just say, both in my personal life and professionally, that if paper is stripped from the bill, it creates a lot of issues for the actual effectiveness of it. So I think I would encourage you all. I recognize that, again, we have a lot of paper products being produced here in Minnesota, and I understand why the industry is concerned about that piece of it. But if it comes out, if paper products come out, it just creates a huge hole and a huge gap and is really problematic. So that would be my piece on that. I mostly wanted to talk about right to repair. As you all know, this is my bill. I left a note for Senator Latz last week. A couple things. There is a cleanup bill, as you know, and I understand that you all have been very supportive of this topic in the past, so I really appreciate that. The cleanup bill, which has both House and Senate files, the big thing on that right now is that I think that there is some hesitation from the chairs in Commerce to hear that. So I would just encourage you to ask your colleagues to just give that time. It needs space to be heard. The biggest thing is we realized in the language that there was some technicalities around manufactured versus sold, the date on when the effectiveness was be, and the language last year that was passed says electronics that were sold after a certain date, and it really needs to be the manufacture date. That's what matters, and that's what's happening in other states. There's also some updates around parts pairing, which has to do with things like your iPod, your what are called AirPods, like that, and pairing them with your phone. And right now there's some loopholes around manufacturers being able to avoid that. I will say that Oregon is on their way to passing a bill that would likely include that. So their legislature, it's on their way to the desk of the governor. So we would be in line with what Oregon is now doing. So it's becoming, fortunately, we now are part of a crew of states that have right to repair. And so that bill is really just essential from a cleanup perspective, and would really appreciate just encouraging your colleagues to hear that. The other one is the agricultural bill, which just has a House file. We did get that this week, which is led by Representative Purcell. The Senate side does not have a companion yet. As you know, last year, agricultural equipment was taken out, and that was really the only way to get any bipartisan support. I understand to a certain degree why there is opposition from some folks for the agricultural side, but the reality is that Colorado has already passed this bill, and it is well on its way to becoming a national standard. And so I think I would like to see Minnesota lead the way on that. The goal with having a standalone agricultural bill is that it helps address some of the concerns in a different way than your cell phone or whatnot. So there's that. And actually, one other last thing on the cleanup bill. Last year, when Senator Rasmussen introduced the agricultural exemptions, he, in my opinion, somewhat disingenuously also brought that all the way down to your power tools and your lawn equipment and your things. So there was an amendment that took out agricultural equipment, but it was also all these other things that many people have, and especially as we see more electric power tools, those computers are going to be even more important to be able to fix. It's not just mechanical products anymore. So cleaning up to unexempt some of those things is going to be really important. So thank you for the time today and for being here, and I really appreciate your support on Right to Repair.
Do you have the number for that, or who is it? Fisher carrying it again, or?
Yeah, so he is. Kupek is carrying so the ag bill is House File 4800, and then I don't have the other two right in front of me here. Let's see here. House File 4418 is the cleanup bill, and Senate File 4407 is the Senate file. Yeah. So thank you so much.
So, thank you for that. Senator Kupek carried the bill, and you're right. The only way he was able to get it passed was to drop agriculture out of it, or farm equipment, which was particularly painful for him since he represents Moorhead, and a lot of the farmland surrounding it. So ag is a big part of his district. But I know there'll be further effort to do that. I am pleased to tell you I received an award from the Fair Repair Coalition for my work in support of that bill last year. So strong supporter of it. And I think Senator Kupek's must be carrying the follow-up bill this year too. So I serve on the Commerce Committee, so I will watch for it.
Good evening. My name is Dave Homans. I live in St. Louis Park. Raised my kids here. Good news is I'm not asking you for money, and I'm not asking you for anything you have to do tonight. And I really want to thank you. I feel so fortunate to be represented by you folks and the work you're doing. I'm here because I have 5 grandchildren, and they're going to live with the climate that we're going to bequeath to them. And, you know, there's a lot of good work being done on this. I particularly meant advocating for a carbon tax solution, which I totally recognize cannot be enacted locally. But I can tell you, I work with an organization called Citizens Climate Lobby, which advocates for a carbon fee and dividend solution. We work with mainly at the federal level, but what we hear from our senators, both Klobuchar and Smith, is that they really care what you folks think and do. And so your endorsement of these kinds of climate solutions actually counts at the national level. I think our future really is critically dependent on this. So I'm going to leave the information with you. I won't take any more of your time. This doesn't have to be done this legislative session, so you're cool on that. But think about it, and I'd be happy to talk to you at any point in time about this. Thank you.
I'm just to say, Dave, thank you. Appreciate you speaking about your grandkids. I don't have grandkids yet, but yeah, this is something that I think about every day, right? So appreciate you advocating for that. Thanks.
Greetings, I'm Stu Hansen. I live in St. Louis Park. I've been a physician at Park Nicollet for a long time, but I've been retired a long time also. So I've worked and lived in St. Louis Park for over 50 years. I want to thank you for supporting the End of Life Options Act. That is an important piece of the kind of work that I did as a pulmonary doctor and a critical care specialist. It's just on the armamentarium, it's just a little piece of what it is to relieve pain and suffering in people who are dying. And I just want to thank you for the support. And I just hope the legislature can bring us up to date with some of the other progressive states that have already passed this. The other thing that we deal with a lot is overtreatment, particularly with people or emergencies coming to the emergency room, resuscitated, and then we find that their brain doesn't work and we've made a mistake. And actually they didn't want to be resuscitated because they had an illness that they were ready to give up on. So one of the things that, and I don't know if it's gotten in, I've talked to Senator Latz about this. It's called the POST order, the provider order for life-sustaining treatment. Right now, we do this privately, and we post it on your refrigerator door, and it drops off because the magnet didn't work, or the emergency team comes in, but you didn't fall down and have a cardiac arrest in your apartment. You're down in your dining room, or you're out eating on the street or somewhere else. And one of the things that I think would be very helpful for our whole emergency medicine treatment is to have a state registry for people who wish not to be resuscitated so that we can identify those wherever they drop. And does that make sense to you? I see some.
Well, I just know about the post order because we're starting to discuss that in our family unit right now too. And it is different than a healthcare directive. It has more binding, right, from what I understand?
Well, the healthcare directive gives your caregivers an idea of how you want to be treated and what you don't want to be treated, and it gets put in a file. But it doesn't come out of the file in the emergency situation. But the post order could do that and the post order is one where some people will say, I want everything done. And you can write out a physician order for life-sustaining treatment and say, I want everything done, no matter what. But particularly people who are getting older, like some of us, and are more feeble and say, I'm tired and I don't want to be resuscitated. I don't want to have tubes put into me. I don't want to have a tube into through my throat into my lung. I don't want to have feeding tubes. I want to give my life up if I can't sustain myself. And the post order allows that to be done. If we had a state registry, a voluntary state registry, where there is ability to register that, so if you have a heart attack and collapse in Wilmer, and you live in St. Louis Park, they would know that, and they would be able to access that, and they would not do excessive treatment that isn't wanted and is not. I hate to bring up the issue of expense, but we spend a lot of money doing medical interventions that aren't useful for people. In fact, some of it they don't want. So this would be, and I don't know where it is. I tried to find out if this was introduced. It was supposed to be introduced, but I haven't seen a bill number in either the Senate or the in the House.
I can check on it too. I'm just thinking, my brain's starting to think like our driver's license have organ donor on them. Like, is that where we'd want to put it? Or we have a lot of electronic records, medical records now, or if it goes there. So I'll look into it. And, yeah.
So there, this wouldn't have, nobody would have to do this. But if they felt that they want to limit their treatment, it would be very valuable and it would be very accessible. And that's the issue that right now I don't see it accessible.
Yeah, and I have to try to understand too where the liability lies with the doctor if it's not followed, or we'll talk.
Okay, thank you.
We just wanted to note very quickly before we continue on that the clock on the side of the room over there is unfortunately a little bit slow. It is 7:04, so we have about 11 minutes left until sundown. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Rick, and I'm a new face to you folks because of the redistricting. I'm a resident of the Edina portion of District 46. So I guess because of the environment and global warming is on everybody's mind, I'm going to toss this out. Let's see, outdoor propane heaters that people have on their patios and various outdoor cafes and things like that. Those are unshielded and they're burning propane. What are the plans to do something about outlawing those? So I do see some venues for their outdoor cafes have the electric strip heats, which can be solar powered, wind powered, and renewables on that sort of stuff. But I also see some long natural gas fired, like not torpedo heaters. They have these long black tubes that radiate heat because they're burning fossil fuels. Is there any consideration forthcoming to basically outlaw those things? It's not, not everybody has a propane mushroom heater in their backyard, but many do, and lots of, outside cafes or whatever, they'll roll them out for the spring and the fall, and that's basically totally wasted heat. And as everybody is clamoring for making housing more efficient, that has a huge cost. Maybe these venues need to tell their patrons to put on a couple more jackets in order to stay warm, or wait for global warming to be a nice 73-degree day outside on that. But at any rate, the real reason why I'm here is basically I stood in aghast of last session's budget spending, and would like to remind everybody here on the panel that every dollar that you spend comes from a taxpayer, either a corporation or an individual. And I've heard, well, this money's coming from the federal government. No, the money's coming from us. It just goes through an extra hand and gets lost in the shuffle on that. And so it's creating a larger and larger load. And you've stated that, well, the revenue coming in is pretty good, but what happens when we get the next pandemic and things like that? I'm looking just on that, and as far as some of this other stuff, the economics, the market generally sets the price on something. Government subsidies only support high prices. I mean, the federal government throws out $7,000 to buy a Tesla. Well, that's a $70,000+ car, and I'm not interested in spending that amount of money. I'm probably not going to be able to buy an electric Chinese vehicle, but that's probably going to be something in the $25,000, $30,000 that I would entertain. But instead, I'm going to go buy another carbon internal combustion engine, simply because every once in a while I have to go out of town on business, which is like to Fargo or Duluth or whatever, and there's no infrastructure. I'm not going to wait half hour, 45 minutes on that. And so I don't do that every day, don't do that every month, but it's still something. Maybe I'll consider getting a electric car for around town, but I'd have to go and rent something from one of the auto rental places. And it's been a long time since I had to do something like that on that. But let's see. And then the other thing as far as last year's cleanup was, I guess, I'm disappointed that we have all this legislation coming out and then catching up on stuff. We went and legalized gummies and cannabis and all that sort of stuff, but we have no effective means of determining who is stoned on the road. And with all the other shenanigans going on with distracted driving and things like that, that seemed to, legalizing something, the consumption, before you have an effective enforcement medium, that was the cart before the horse. And then on a slightly different thing, the school resource officers fiasco. I don't know. I have a job which is not monitoring you folks. I expect there to be other adults in the room that could do that for me. And apparently that didn't happen last year with those two items, and then the 40% plus increase in the state budget. So with that, I'll shut up and let somebody else have a thing. But thank you for at least being here and listening and not having the hook come around my neck and dragging me out.
One, we'd never do that. Two, you're right. Every dollar that we spend is taxpayer dollar. We also want to make sure that we're getting our fair share in Minnesota, and a lot of federal dollars get spent on other states that don't come back to us. So sometimes we have to pony up a little bit to get that money that our taxpayers are putting into the federal dollars, so it's not going to states that to other states. A lot of the spending we did last year was one-time spending because of COVID. And why I say that is when the federal government, who can print money when we have to balance our budgets, put a lot of money into the economy and to help folks through COVID. And so we didn't spend that state money, which then rolled over. So you saw that big spike, and you're right, it looks like a big, huge increase in state government. But that is going to go back down again next session. And then a lot of us will be there to remind everybody that it will. And the SRO thing, I'm not going to take our time, but I can explain how that all happened. But we'll go to the next person, or people can add real quick.
I want to throw out one thing. You talked about EVs. So there actually is a bunch of work going on infrastructure. One bill that I carried last session that we passed was the NEVI bill, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, where we're putting up 20%. The federal government puts up 80%. And it starts by putting charging infrastructure every 50 miles on alternative fuel corridors. The first two are 94 and 35. Those should be happening this year, and then they'll go beyond that. It's a 5-year program. So we need to do more, but yeah, that's making progress there.
And I'll just add on 2 points. One is, I agree with Cheryl on the one-time money expenditure. So the 40% number isn't an accurate number in terms of the long-term budget increase. But you brought up the driving while impaired by cannabis. There actually is a way to monitor those who are impaired by something other than alcohol. They're drug recognition evaluators. All of the state patrol officers are trained in that. Many of our local police officers are as well. It's not the same as a blow test, which you can use to get a defined level of alcohol concentration, but it is a way of determining the impact of whatever substance may be impairing someone and using that to establish whether or not they are legally impaired. And also, we are in the middle now of a pilot project that's being run through the State Patrol to determine a roadside saliva test to determine the presence of THC. So it's not like we're way behind in that regard. We are working on that. And I'll just add on the SROs, because we just had a big debate on this on the Senate floor yesterday, and I expect by Thursday we'll be passing a bill on this. There's a lot of competing interests there. And I will say it was a not the best process that got us where we ended up last August. And there's no point in going through a long explanation of that right now. But I think that where we are ending up, we'll end up very shortly, is a good balanced place that includes a lot of training, a lot of accountability, guidelines. And leaves it up to local control to determine if they wish to have SROs in the schools, and has some minimum requirements for contracts if they choose to go that route. We're not going to get into a back and forth because we are almost out of time, and we have another person who wants to talk. But thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Trigo, and I'll make this really quick. I wasn't prepared to speak, but the grandparent that spoke inspired me. I want to thank you, Senator Latz, for meeting with me last July. I'm part of the grandparent group, Grand USA, and we are trying to challenge the Minnesota Statute 257C for standing for grandparents to have visitation. So I know you're working on it with Senator Pappas and Housley, and you were the first one. Your admin got us that meeting so quick. Other suburbs have not been so responsive, and I just want to say, don't forget about us. Our grandchildren are getting older, and our grandparents are certainly getting older, and parental alienation is epidemic. Didn't know about it 2 years ago, but I'm well versed in it now, and I know Minnesota cares about children, and we need your help, so thank you.
Thank you for saying so.
Thank you all so much. We're going to end now. And for a minute. So thank you all for coming out.
Thank you for all coming out.